The click of polished shoes echoed through the marble-floored jet bridge. Passengers in first class had already begun settling into their champagne-scented, ultra-soft leather seats. A hushed luxury blanketed the cabin, with the occasional rustle of newspapers and whispers in accented English. Among the passengers, a tall black man in his 50s quietly took his seat by the window in 1A. He wore a modest navy sweater, beige slacks, and black slip-ons, comfortable, not flashy. His beard was neatly trimmed, and his expression calm, like a man used to long flights and silence. He sat with a book on his lap, unopened, his eyes closed in stillness. Minutes later, a sharp voice sliced through the peace. "You must be joking," said a well-dressed white man with salt and pepper hair, pulling off his sunglasses as he stopped at 1B. His suit screamed luxury. His watch, glinting in the overhead light, ticked like it knew it was worth more than most people's cars. He turned to the flight attendant who had been checking boarding passes nearby. "I paid nearly $9,000 for this seat," he hissed. "And you expect me to sit next to this?" The attendant blinked. "Sir, everyone has the right to sit." "No," he snapped. "No. I will not sit beside someone who clearly doesn't belong here. Just look at him. Look at what he's wearing." The man in 1A said nothing. He didn't open his eyes. He didn't turn to defend himself. His breathing remained steady. If he had heard the insult, he gave no sign. Passengers around them began to take notice. A businessman at 1C shifted in his seat. A young couple in row 2 stopped their whispered conversation. The man's words had been clear, loud enough to be heard, sharp enough to pierce the quiet comfort of first class. The attendant, still smiling politely but now visibly tense, tried again. "Sir, I can assure you this passenger is fully authorized to sit in 1A. The rich man scoffed. "Authorized? What is this charity class now? Is this your idea of equality?" Still the black man said nothing. And then, for the first time, he opened his eyes. They were calm, observant, and still carried no anger. Only patience. He slowly turned his head, looked at the man beside him, then at the flight attendant. "If it helps," he said softly, "I can move." The rich man smiled smugly, clearly taking the offer as a win. The attendant looked horrified but said nothing. And yet, as the black man stood to adjust his seatbelt and collect his bag, a quiet voice came through the intercom from the cockpit. "Mr. Daniels, this is your captain speaking. When you're ready, we'd like to speak with you in the cockpit for a moment." Every head in first class turned, including the man who had insulted him. The black man paused, gently nodded at the flight attendant, and walked forward. The cabin was silent. Then someone whispered, "Wait, Mr. Daniels?" The name lingered in the air like smoke. Mr. Daniels. A whisper that came not from the man himself, but from the cockpit. Soft, respectful, certain. The rich man's smirk faltered for the first time. He looked toward the front of the cabin as the black man walked calmly toward the cockpit door, which opened before he even reached it. A uniformed pilot greeted him with a warm smile and stepped aside, as if receiving a guest of honor. Gasps rippled through first class. The couple in row 2 leaned closer to each other. The man at 1C straightened up in his seat. Someone further back whispered, "He knows the captain?" Another voice followed, quieter but sharper. "Did he say Mr. Daniels?" The rich man turned to the flight attendant. "Who exactly is he?" She didn't answer. Her lips were pressed tightly together. She stared at the cockpit, then slowly turned and walked away. The moment grew heavy. No more rustling newspapers. No more small talk. The luxurious hum of the aircraft seemed distant now, as all eyes stayed fixed on the front. Inside the cockpit, though the door remained slightly open, no one could hear what was being said. But the expressions on the faces of the pilot and the black man were enough. There was no awkwardness, no confusion, only familiarity. A few nods. A chuckle from the co-pilot. It lasted only a minute. Then Mr. Daniels stepped out again. The pilot followed him to the edge of the cabin and paused there, watching respectfully as the man walked back toward his seat. As he approached, the rich man cleared his throat and adjusted his jacket. The smugness had vanished. A bead of sweat slid slowly from his temple to his jaw. He looked down at his hands, then up at the man returning to 1A. But Mr. Daniels said nothing. He simply sat back down, slowly fastened his seatbelt, and picked up his book. The rich man tried to recover his voice. "So, you work for the airline?" Mr. Daniels didn't look at him. He turned a page in silence. The rich man chuckled nervously. "Well, listen, I didn't mean..." He stopped, because another flight attendant had arrived. Not the one from before. This one wore a darker blazer, carried a digital tablet, and spoke with a calm authority. "Sir," she said to the rich man, "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass again." The color drained from his face. "Is something wrong?" The attendant didn't answer right away. She simply extended her hand, eyes steady, voice firm. "Your boarding pass, please." Around them, passengers watched like an audience before a curtain rose. Mr. Daniels sat still. His eyes remained on the page. He hadn't said a word. He didn't have to. The rich man fumbled in his blazer, pulling out the pristine boarding pass and handing it over. His fingers trembled slightly as the attendant scanned it with her tablet. She studied the screen, then looked up at him. "Thank you," she said. Her voice remained calm, but there was no smile. "Please come with me." What? He asked, voice sharp again but now laced with uncertainty. "It's a request from the captain," she replied. His jaw tightened. "This is ridiculous. I haven't done anything wrong." The attendant didn't respond. She simply stepped aside, leaving the path open toward the back of the plane. The man stayed seated. "I paid for this seat. First class. I have every right to." The tablet in her hands lit up again. A message flashed, silent and undeniable. She lowered it slightly and added, "Sir, refusal to comply may result in denial of service on future flights. We don't want to escalate this." The rich man looked around. Nobody came to his defense. The businessman at 1C stared out the window. The couple in row 2 avoided his gaze. A mother across the aisle pulled her child a little closer, whispering something in his ear. The atmosphere had shifted. He was no longer the one in control. With a heavy sigh, he rose to his feet. His expensive watch slid down his wrist as he reached for his luggage. He shot a final glance at Mr. Daniels. Still silent. Still reading. The man hesitated for just a moment longer, then muttered under his breath, "This is absurd." But even his muttering was empty now. No one listened. He followed the attendant down the aisle, his steps quick and stiff. The curtain separating first class from business class swayed as he passed through it, disappearing from view. The curtain fell back into place with a soft whoosh, and the silence returned. But it was a different silence now. This time it carried weight, awareness, reflection, the kind that sticks with people. Mr. Daniels turned another page. The flight attendant from earlier returned to his side. "Sir," she said quietly, "I want to apologize for what happened." He looked up at her, a hint of kindness in his eyes. "You don't need to," he said, "but I appreciate it." She nodded, then added something under her breath. Something only he could hear. "Thank you for the way you handled it." Mr. Daniels gave a faint smile. Some things are better handled quietly. Then he returned to his book, while the aircraft continued taxiing toward the runway. But as it turned, catching the afternoon sunlight across its polished wings, another voice buzzed quietly over the intercom. A familiar voice. "This is your captain speaking. We're honored to have all of you on board, and especially grateful to welcome Mr. William Daniels, founder and CEO of Horizon Airways." Gasps echoed once more through first class. Mr. Daniels didn't flinch. He simply turned another page. The revelation hung in the air like thunder after lightning. Founder and CEO. Mr. Daniels. Passengers shifted in their seats, some blinking in disbelief, others glancing at the curtain the rich man had disappeared behind. Whispered conversation started to bloom, cautiously at first, then bolder. The man at 1C leaned over. "I had no idea. That was William Daniels?" Mr. Daniels did not respond. His eyes were still on the page, but his presence now carried a weight no one could ignore. Even the flight attendants moved with a different energy. There was respect in every glance, every gesture near him. They didn't overdo it. There were no bows or special drinks. Just quiet precision. Deference. They knew who he was. And now, so did everyone else. In the back, behind the curtain, the man who had insulted him sat hunched in a narrow seat. His legs were cramped. The tray table refused to close properly. A baby cried somewhere behind him. A flight attendant passed by without meeting his eye. He tugged at his collar. The air felt thinner now. His fingers tapped nervously on the armrest. Every now and then he glanced toward the front of the plane, toward the place he had once occupied, toward the man he had humiliated. His mind replayed the moment over and over. The tone in his own voice, the smugness, the assumption. He remembered saying, "I paid thousands for this seat," and now realized who he had said it to. The man who had built the very airline he was riding. His hand curled into a fist, then relaxed. He exhaled through his nose, shoulders slumping, eyes dull. In the cockpit, the captain adjusted the controls and muttered to his co-pilot, "He handled it with more grace than I would have." The co-pilot nodded. "That man's seen a lot more than we know." As the aircraft lifted off, the lights of New York shrank below, vanishing beneath a soft bed of clouds. Back in 1A, Mr. Daniels put down his book for a moment. He looked out the window at the sky streaking past, lost in thought. The cabin around him had settled into silence again, but it was a different silence now. A humbled silence, a watching silence. And just then the curtain behind him moved again. Softly, slowly. Someone had come back to first class. The curtain rustled like wind in still air, parting just enough for the man to step through. His posture was no longer proud. Shoulders rounded, eyes low, his tailored jacket now looked like a costume, something borrowed from a world he never truly owned. No one said a word. He paused near the aisle, a few steps away from Mr. Daniels, who hadn't turned to acknowledge him. The other passengers watched, breaths shallow, expressions unreadable. I wanted to say something," the man began, his voice barely above a whisper. "About earlier." Mr. Daniels didn't move. The man cleared his throat, glancing down at the carpet as if the words were written there. "I didn't know who you were. That's no excuse, but I was wrong. I was very wrong." Still no response. Only the soft hum of the engine and the quiet clinking of ice in a glass being served in the back row. "I've made assumptions my whole life," the man continued, forcing the words out like they weighed more than he could carry. "I judged you the second I saw you. I thought I knew everything by the way you looked." He paused, waiting for something, an answer, a sign, a punishment. But Mr. Daniels simply reached for his book again, sliding a bookmark gently between the pages. The man stood there, exposed and powerless. "I know it doesn't change anything," he said quietly, "but I'm sorry." And then he turned, slowly stepping back toward the curtain, the heavy eyes of first class trailing behind him like shadows. But just as his hand reached for the fabric, Mr. Daniels finally spoke. "You were never wrong about who I am." The man froze. Mr. Daniels's voice was steady, smooth, without anger. "You just never bothered to find out." The curtain closed behind him. The passengers around Mr. Daniels exhaled as if they'd been holding their breath. Some looked down at their laps. Others glanced sideways with expressions somewhere between shame and reflection. The rest of the flight passed in quiet reverence. No one disturbed him again. The attendants brought him what he needed before he asked. A young woman further down slipped him a note on a napkin that simply said, "Thank you." He never replied, never turned dramatic, never demanded anything. He simply existed. And somehow that changed the entire cabin. The wheels touched the tarmac with a smooth thud, sending a soft jolt through the cabin. The engines roared down to a purr as the aircraft glided across the runway, slowing to a calm roll under the gray London sky. Passengers stirred. Phones lit up. Seatbelts clicked. Conversations resumed, but with a quietness that hadn't been there when the flight began. Mr. Daniels remained still in his seat, his book now resting closed on the tray table. His eyes gazed out the window as if searching the clouds for something only he could see. The captain's voice came over the intercom again, warm and composed. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to London Heathrow. On behalf of Horizon Airways, we thank you for flying with us. And once again, a personal thanks to Mr. Daniels for joining us today." Some passengers clapped. It wasn't loud or forced, just a few sincere gestures of respect. A ripple of acknowledgement for a man who had never once demanded it. The man who had insulted him stayed seated in business class, staring down at the floor, knowing his exit would be late, his shame waiting outside with every step. As the plane came to a full stop at the gate, a team of ground crew appeared near the first-class jet bridge. One of them, wearing a radio earpiece, stepped inside and nodded toward Mr. Daniels. "We're ready, sir." Mr. Daniels stood. Not quickly, not slowly. Just with the ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times. He thanked the crew with a nod, shook hands with the lead flight attendant, then turned to leave. As he walked toward the exit, a child in the first row looked up from her tablet. Her mother leaned over and whispered something in her ear. The girl's eyes widened as she watched him pass. When he reached the door, the captain stepped out from the cockpit one final time. He extended a hand and Mr. Daniels shook it. "Always a pleasure to have you aboard," the captain said. Mr. Daniels smiled. "You run a good team." Then he stepped out. Sunlight met him as he descended the stairs onto the tarmac. A sleek black car waited nearby, engine running. The driver stood at attention, door already open. He didn't look back at the plane. Not once. Inside the aircraft, as the passengers prepared to disembark, the cabin felt different. Not just because the flight was over, but because something had been stripped away. Something false. Something fragile. And in its place, a quiet kind of respect had settled in. The kind earned, not claimed. The rich man was the last to leave the plane. He lingered in his seat long after the other passengers had filed out, his fingers clutching the strap of his briefcase like it might keep him anchored to a version of himself that no longer made sense. Outside the window, he saw the black car disappear around the corner of the terminal, swallowed by the fleet of airport service vehicles and blinking signal lights. He stood at last, shoulders drooped, and made his way through the cabin with none of his former pride. No confident glances. No small talk with attendants. Just a man burdened by the weight of his own voice replaying in his memory. He stepped out into the jet bridge, cold metal beneath his feet. As he entered the terminal, he noticed a tall young man in a dark blazer waiting near the gate, holding a tablet. The man looked at him, then away, disinterested. But behind him, a large screen flickered with a promotional video for Horizon Airways. There, in perfect resolution, was the face he now knew all too well. Mr. Daniels. Standing on a runway, shaking hands with international leaders. Inspecting new aircraft designs. Speaking in a clean, elegant auditorium. His voice narrated the ad in calm, assured tones. Leadership is not in what you wear. It's in what you build, how you treat people, and how you rise when others look down. The rich man stopped walking. Passengers passed him by, some pushing luggage carts, some chasing toddlers. But he stood frozen, watching the screen, the same voice that had barely spoken on the plane now echoing across the terminal like a quiet judgment. The screen cut to black with the Horizon Airways logo fading in. And beneath it, one final line. Founded with dignity. Flown with purpose. He lowered his eyes and walked on. Outside the terminal, a taxi driver stood holding a sign with his name on it. He nodded and approached, tossing his bag in the trunk. As the car pulled away from the curb, the driver asked, "First time flying Horizon?" The man looked out the window. "No," he said softly, "but it was the first time I really saw it." And with that, the car disappeared into the flow of traffic, leaving behind the airport, the memory of a flight, and the quiet truth he would never be able to forget. Moral of the story. Never judge someone's worth by their appearance, their clothes, or the seat they occupy. True power often moves in silence. Respect should not be given based on status, but on humanity. Because the person you look down on today may be the very one who built the world you benefit from tomorrow.